She should not have been there, and I knew it before I knew anything else. That is the truth of the thing, the part I keep circling back to in the quiet hours when the palace sleeps, and I am left alone with the memory of it. I did not see the item in her hands first. I did not hear a sound out of place, not yet. What I felt, standing my post at the head of the east nursery corridor at 20 minutes past 11 on a cold spring night, was a wrongness in the geometry of the dark, a shape where no shape belonged, a stillness that was the wrong kind of still. My name is Corwin Vance, and for 9 years I had stood guard inside the walls of Harrowgate Palace, seat of the royal house of Harrowgate, in the kingdom of Eldermore. 6 of those years I had spent on the nursery rotation, the post they give to the men they trust most and advertise least. There is no glamour in it. No tourists photograph the nursery corridor. No cameras pan across the man who stands all night outside 2 sleeping children's doors. The famous guards are the ones at the front gates, immaculate in red and black, motionless under the gaze of 10,000 phones. I was the other kind. The kind nobody is meant to notice, because if you notice us, something has already gone wrong. The corridor I guarded ran east to west along the 3rd floor of the residential wing, lined with portraits of long-dead Harrowgates who watched the dark with painted eyes. At the far end, behind a door of white-painted oak, slept Prince Joran, 10 years old and forever pretending he was older. Nearer to me, behind a door with a small brass handle worn bright by small hands, slept Princess Maelin, who was 8, and who still left her nightlight burning because the dark, she said, was a thing that watched you back. I had heard her say it once to her mother, the Queen, in the careless voice children use for the truths adults have forgotten. The dark watches you back. I have never been able to unhear it. That night the dark was watching, and so was I, and the woman in the corridor was watching too. She stood perhaps 15 feet from the princess's door, in the recess between 2 portraits where the light from the single sconce did not quite reach. She wore the gray of the household staff, the soft gray tunic and skirt of the night service, the people who turn down the beds and bank the fires and carry away the dinner trays. I knew the night service. I knew their faces the way you know the faces of people you have stood beside in the small hours for years, the people who bring you nothing and ask you nothing and share the long boredom of the watch. I did not know hers. That was the first wrong thing, not the largest, but the first. I have been asked many times since, by people who were not there and who imagine that vigilance is a kind of suspicion, why I did not simply call out, why I did not challenge her at once, the moment I saw a stranger in gray where no stranger should be. The answer is the whole of what my training had made me, and it is this: a guard who reacts is a guard who can be used. The first lesson they teach you in the household service, before they teach you the names of the family or the layout of the wing or the protocols of the watch, is that your stillness is your weapon. An alarm raised too soon warns the wrong people. A challenge shouted into the dark tells the intruder exactly where you are and exactly what you know. The trained man does not flinch at the first wrong thing. He holds, he watches. He lets the wrongness reveal its full shape before he moves, because a half-seen wrong, acted on too fast, can be made to look like nothing. And then the door closes, and the thing you feared walks free, and you are the man who made a scene over a maid. So I held and I watched her, and I let the long discipline of 9 years settle over me like the cold settles over stone. I did not move my head. I moved my eyes only. I am good at that. It is the first small art they teach you, to see everything while appearing to see nothing, to be a statue with a searchlight behind its painted gaze. And what I saw, in the slow seconds while she did not yet know she was seen, built the wrongness from a feeling into a fact. She was facing the princess's door, not passing it. Not turning down the bed in some other room and pausing in the corridor to rest her feet. Facing it, square on, the way you face a thing you have come for. Her body was angled toward that small worn brass handle, and her weight was forward on the balls of her feet, and her head was tilted in the particular attitude of someone listening for breathing, for the small sounds a sleeping child makes, for the certainty that the room beyond the door held what she expected it to hold. And her hands were not empty. I could not see yet what they held. The recess was dark and her body was turned half away, and whatever it was, she held it low and close, against the gray of her skirt, in the manner of a person who knows that what they carry must not be seen. But I could see that her hands were occupied. I could see the particular tension in her shoulders and forearms that means a person is gripping something, holding it ready, and not merely standing with their arms at their sides. The night service carries things, of course, a tray, a folded blanket, a warming pan, a candle. But you do not hold a folded blanket low and hidden against your skirt as though it were a sin. You do not face a sleeping child's door with your weight forward and your head tilted to listen, while your hands cradle a thing you do not want seen. The cold in me went very deep and very quiet then. It is a feeling I have learned to trust above all others, the feeling that comes not as fear but as a kind of terrible clarity, a sharpening of the whole world down to a single point. Everything that was not that woman and that door and her hidden hands simply fell away. The portraits, the cold floor under my boots, the distant tick of the great clock on the second-floor landing, gone. There was only the wrongness, and it had a shape now, and the shape was this: a stranger in stolen gray, outside the door of a sleeping 8-year-old, holding something she did not want anyone to see. I had perhaps 4 seconds in which to decide everything. This is what people who were not there do not understand. They imagine that a moment like that is loud, that it announces itself, that the body floods with alarm and the right thing to do is plain. It is not. A moment like that is quiet. It is so quiet that the easiest thing in the world, the thing nearly every instinct of an ordinary, tired man at the end of a long watch would tell you to do, is to decide that it is nothing, that she is new, that she lost her way, that you are tired and seeing shadows, and that if you challenge her and you are wrong, you will be the fool who frightened a maid and woke the children and earned yourself a reprimand and a story that follows you for years. Every easy thing told me to let it go. I did not let it go. I have asked myself 1,000 times what made the difference on that night between the man I was and the man who would have shrugged and looked away, and the answer is not courage, because there was no danger to me. The answer is the thing they cannot teach you and can only hope you have, that the children behind those doors were not my charge in the way a task is a charge. They were my charge in the way a life is. And the dark, the princess had told her mother, watches you back. So I took one slow breath, and I let the stillness become its opposite, and I stepped out of my post into the light. I did not run, I did not call out, a trained man does not. I walked, 3 measured steps that brought me out of the shadow at the corridor's head and into the soft fall of the sconce, and I let my boots make exactly enough sound on the floor that she would know a man was there, without knowing yet how much he had seen. She turned, and in turning she did the thing that told me everything. A member of the night service, surprised in a corridor by the guard, does one of 2 things, and I have seen both 100 times. The new ones startle, a small jump, a hand to the chest, an embarrassed half-laugh, because they have not yet learned that we are always there and they always forget it. The old ones do not even break stride. They nod, they murmur a word, they go on about their work, because to them we are furniture, a fixed and friendly fact of the dark. Either way, the body relaxes. The surprise, when it comes upward toward the face into a smile or a startled breath. The relief of recognition. This woman's surprise went down. Her hands, the hands that held the hidden thing, pressed harder into the gray of her skirt, drawing the object closer to her body, lower, behind the fall of cloth. Her shoulders did not rise in a startle. They dropped and squared, the posture of a person bracing rather than greeting. And her face, when it came around to me, wore no smile at all. It wore the careful, emptied calm of someone who has practiced this exact moment in their mind, and is now performing the version they rehearsed. "You gave me a fright," she said. Her voice was low and even and pitched not to carry. "I didn't see you there." That was the second lie. The first had been her gray. Now this, because no one is frightened in a whisper. Fright is loud or it is silent. It does not arrange itself into a quiet, conversational complaint. She was managing me. She was already in the first 3 seconds trying to make this small, to make it ordinary, to give me a story I could comfortably believe so that I would step back into my shadow and let her finish whatever she had come to finish. "You're new to the night service," I said. I kept my own voice flat and unhurried, the voice we use, the voice that gives nothing. I did not phrase it as a question. I wanted to see what she would do with a statement she had to either confirm or correct. "This week," she said smoothly. "I was sent up to see to the fire in the princess's room. It was banked low." She tilted her head a fraction toward the door, toward Maelin's door, and I understood that she had decided to commit to the boldest version of the lie, the one that would explain everything if it held. She was meant to go into that room. She was a step from inventing the authority to open that door. And once it was opened, once she was inside with a sleeping child, and the guard reassured and gone back to his post. "At this hour," I said, "the fires are seen to before 9, by Marin and old Tomas. Not after 11 and not by someone I have never stood a watch with." Something moved behind her eyes. Not fear, calculation. The look of a person discovering that the door they expected to walk through has a lock they did not plan for. And in that flicker I saw, for the first time, that she was not stupid, and not desperate in the wild way of a thief, and not mad. She was prepared. She had a story, and a posture, and a whisper-pitched calm, and only one thing she had not counted on: that the man at the head of this particular corridor would not take the easy road of believing her. "Show me your hands," I said. I want to be honest about how thin the ground was beneath me in that moment, because the people who hear this story often imagine the guard as certain, righteous, sure of his cause from the first heartbeat. I was not. I had a feeling and 4 seconds worth of small wrong details. I had no proof of anything. If I was wrong, if she truly was new, if there truly was some night service errand I did not know of, if her hands held nothing but a cloth and a key to the linen press, then I was a guard who had cornered a frightened woman in a dark corridor and demanded she show me her hands like a constable, and the morning would bring an inquiry and an apology and a black mark and the slow erosion of the trust that had kept me on this floor for 6 years. Every easy thing in me again said, "Let her go, step back, believe the story, it costs you nothing and it spares you everything." But the dark watches you back. "Show me your hands," I said again, and this time I let a half step of weight come forward onto my own boots, and I let the flat voice carry just the faintest edge of the thing underneath it. Not a threat. We do not threaten, but a certainty. The certainty of a man who has decided that this corridor will not be crossed and that the easy road is closed. She looked at me for a long moment. The great clock on the landing ticked and ticked and ticked. Behind the white oak door, 15 feet away, an 8-year-old child breathed the slow, deep breaths of sleep, knowing nothing of the 2 adults who stood in the dark deciding her night. And I watched the woman in gray arrive, visibly, at the understanding that her rehearsed version had failed, that the guard had not played his part, and that she must now choose between 2 roads of her own. The first road was to comply, to bring her hands out into the light, to show me whatever she carried, and to gamble that I would not understand what I was looking at, or that she could explain it, or that it was innocent enough after all. The second road was the other thing, the thing a cornered person does, the bolt or the lunge or the scream and accuse that turns a quiet confrontation into chaos and brings every door on the floor flying open. I watched her weigh them. I have replayed that half-second more times than any other in my life, because everything turned on it, and because I have come to believe that she did not, in that half-second, choose at all, that the choice was made for her by the simple, undeniable fact that I was a trained man at full attention, and she had no way past me she liked. She brought her hands out slowly, into the light. And I saw what she had been holding against her skirt, low and hidden, in the dark outside a sleeping child's door, and the cold in me, which had been deep and quiet, went suddenly to ice. It was not a cloth. It was not a key to the linen press. It was not a candle or a warming pan or any honest thing the night service carries. In her right hand, held flat across her palm, was a slim gray case no larger than a deck of cards, and from the seam of it ran a thread of wire, fine as a hair, that she had been holding pinched between two fingers of her left hand. And clipped to the breast of her stolen gray tunic, where I had not seen it in the shadow, was a second small device, dark and matte, with a single lens at its center that did not reflect the light the way glass reflects it. The deadened, drinking dark of a thing made to watch without being watched. I did not know in that first instant exactly what they were, but I knew what they were not. They were not anything that belonged in the hands of a stranger in stolen gray, outside the bedroom of the 8-year-old Princess Maelin of the royal house of Harrowgate, at 20 minutes past 11 on a cold spring night. And I knew, with the terrible clarity that comes not as fear but as a sharpening of the whole world to a single point, that I had been right to hold and right to step out and right to close the easy road, because whatever this was, it was larger than one woman, and it had come for the child. "Don't," I said. She had begun, very slightly, to draw her right hand back toward her body, back toward the dark, where the gray case and its hair-thin wire could be tucked away, hidden again, made into nothing. The instinct of every person caught with a thing they must not be caught with, hide it, and deny it ever existed. I had seen it in thieves and in liars, and once, years ago, in a man at the gates who had drawn a blade and then, too late, tried to make it disappear back into his coat, as though the disappearing could undo the drawing. "Keep them in the light," I said, "both hands, slowly, and do not let go of what you're holding." That last was the important part, and she did not yet understand why I said it, but I did. Because the wire, the fine thread running from the seam of the gray case, pinched between two fingers of her left hand, was not a thread for carrying. You do not carry a small case by a hair of wire. That wire was connected to something, or about to be, and a thing connected by a wire that a person holds pinched and ready is a thing that does something when the wire is pulled, or released, or completed. I did not know what, but I knew that the worst thing I could do, the very worst, was to startle her into a sudden motion of those hands before I understood what those hands could do. So I did not lunge. I did not grab. The whole of my training, the whole of the long discipline that the easy world mistakes for mere stillness, was bent now toward a single purpose: to keep this woman and the things she held perfectly motionless in the light, while I made the situation safe by inches. "My name is Corwin," I said. I had never in 9 years given my name to a stranger in a corridor. "We are not men with names, we are the watch." But I gave her mine because the second art they teach you, after the art of seeing without seeming to see, is the art of slowing a frightened person down. A name is a small human thing thrown across a widening gap. It says, "We are two people in a room, not a hunter and a hunted." It buys seconds, and seconds were the only currency I had. "I don't care what your name is," she said, but her hand stayed in the light. That was what mattered. "Then you don't have to tell me," I said. "But you're going to keep those hands exactly where they are, and you're going to tell me what you're holding, because I think you already know that I'm not going to walk away, and I think you already know that the longer we stand here the worse this gets for you and the better it gets for the people who sent you." The flicker again behind her eyes, the people who sent you. I had said it as a guess, the way you cast a line into dark water and I watched it strike something. Her jaw tightened. Her gaze went, for the briefest instant, not to me and not to the door, but down the corridor toward the west stair, the way out, or the way someone else might come in. And in that instant I understood 3 things at once, the way you understand the shape of a room in a single lightning flash. The first, she was not alone. The glance toward the stair was not the glance of a lone intruder measuring her escape. It was the glance of a person waiting for, or fearing, someone else. She was the hand. There was an arm behind the hand, and the arm reached somewhere I could not yet see. The second, she was afraid. Not of me, or not only of me. The careful, emptied calm she had worn when she turned was cracking now, not into the fear of a person caught by the guard, but into a deeper and stranger fear, the fear of a person who has been caught between two dangers and is realizing that both of them are real. The people who sent you. I had meant it as pressure. I had not understood yet that it was also the truest thing in the corridor. The third, whatever was about to happen would happen soon, because she had glanced at the stair, and a person who glances at the stair is a person on a schedule, and a schedule means that somewhere someone was counting the minutes, and the minutes were running out. "I'm going to ask you once more," I said very quietly, "and then I'm going to raise the watch, and once I raise the watch this stops being something you can walk back from. What are you holding?" She looked at me. The clock ticked, and then, in a voice so low I felt it more than heard it, she said the thing that turned the whole night over on its axis. "If you raise the watch," she whispered, "she dies. The little one, that's the whole point of it. You raise the alarm, the men at the bottom of the west stair hear the alarm, and they finish it from where they are, and there's nothing you or I or anyone in this corridor can do to stop it. So no, you will not raise the watch. You'll stand very still, Corwin, and you'll listen to me, because right now I am the only thing standing between that child and the people who want her gone, and you've just walked into the middle of it with your boots on. I have been a guard for 9 years. I have stood at gates while crowds screamed and surged. I have stood at state funerals where a kingdom wept. I have faced a man with a blade and a drunk with a bottle and 100 small ugly mornings in 100 forms. I had never, in all of it, felt the floor tilt the way it tilted then. Because I had walked into that corridor believing I understood the shape of the wrong. A stranger in stolen gray, a hidden device, a child asleep behind a door. The shape was an attack, and the woman was the attacker, and my duty was the oldest and simplest duty there is. Put my body between the threat and the child. I had been certain of it. The certainty had carried me out of my shadow and across the floor and into the demand that she show me her hands. And now, in 11 whispered words, she had taken the shape of the wrong and turned it inside out. She was not the threat, or she was not only the threat. She was a thread, a single thread that ran from this corridor down the west stair to men I could not see, and from those men outward to people I could not yet imagine. And the device in her hands was not, perhaps, a weapon at all, but something stranger and worse. A piece in a machine that had been built, carefully, over time, by someone with the reach to put a false maid in a stolen tunic outside a princess's door, and the cruelty to make that made the last lock on the cage. I did not believe her, understand that. I did not in that moment take a word she said as truth. She was a proven liar, the gray, the fright, the fire that needed banking, and a person who has lied 3 times in 2 minutes does not become trustworthy because her 4th statement is frightening. The first rule of being managed is that the most frightening thing a manipulator can say is often the most useful thing they can say, precisely because fear makes you obey. But I also did not disbelieve her, and in the gap between believing and disbelieving, in that narrow, treacherous country where a guard must act on a truth he cannot yet verify, I made the second decision of the night. I did not raise the watch. I will tell you what I did instead, and I will tell you why, because the why is the whole of the story and the rest is only what happened. I did the one thing the corridor allowed me to do that cost nothing and risked nothing and bought me everything I would need. I stayed still, and I made her keep talking. A person who is lying must keep their lies in order, and the more they talk, the heavier that work becomes, and the heavier it becomes the more the truth leaks out around the edges of it. A person who is telling the truth, on the other hand, grows steadier as they talk, not shakier, because the truth carries its own weight and needs no propping. I did not yet know which kind of talker she was. So I gave her the thing every talker wants, which is an audience that does not interrupt, and I watched to see whether her story grew lighter or heavier in her hands. Tell me how it works, I said. The case, the wire. If she dies when I raise the alarm, then I need to understand exactly how, because I'm not going to take your word for it, and I'm not going to gamble her life on a threat I can't see the shape of. It was the right thing to say. I knew at the moment it left me, because something in her face changed, a small loosening, the loosening of a person who has been braced for a fight and is handed instead a question. She had expected me to panic, or to lunge, or to bolt for the alarm. She had not expected the guard to ask her to explain. It's not a bomb if that's what your face is doing, she said. I'm not a fool and neither are they. A bomb in the residential wing wakes the whole palace and brings the army down on everyone, themselves included. They don't want noise. They want it quiet. They want it to look like nothing. Then what is it? She glanced again at the stair. Then slowly, keeping her hands in the light as I had told her, she turned her right palm a few degrees so that I could see the gray case more clearly. It was, I saw now, two things joined. A flat body the size of a deck of cards, and beneath it a smaller component, darker, with the fine wire running out of it. And the second device, the matte black one clipped to her breast with the deadened lens. I understood that one now too, or thought I did. The thing on my chest is a camera, she said. It sends what it sees out of the palace to a van, to a man with a screen. He has been watching this corridor through my eyes for the last 40 minutes. He watched you step out of the dark. He's watching you now. She let that sit a moment, and I felt the skin between my shoulders draw tight, because it was true, or it was the kind of true that could not be disproved, which in a dark corridor at midnight is the same as true. The case is the other half. It's a key, not a metal key. A key that talks to the lock on her door, the new lock, the quiet electronic one they fitted to the nursery doors last winter, after the business with the gates. It opens without a sound and without a record. No turned handle, no broken wood, no alarm on the board downstairs. The door simply unlocks and someone walks in, and the board never knows. The new lock, I knew the lock she meant. They had come last winter. The quiet men with their tools and their clearances, and fitted slim electronic locks to the doors of the residential wing, Maelin's, Joran's, the Queen's own apartments, and we had all been told it was an improvement, a hardening, a modern safeguard against exactly the kind of intrusion that a man with a stolen key could no longer manage, because there was no longer a metal key to steal. I had stood beside those locks for a year and a half and thought them a wall. And now a woman in a corridor was telling me that someone had built, or bought, or stolen a thing that talked to that wall, and made it open like a curtain. And the wire, I said. The wire arms it, she said. Right now it's safe. The case can't talk to the lock while I'm holding the wire pinched, because the pinch breaks the circuit. The moment I let go, the moment my fingers come apart, it wakes up, and it finds the lock, and it opens the door. 3 seconds, maybe 4. That's all it takes. Her eyes came up to mine and held them, and for the first time there was something in them that was not calculation and not the cracked fear of a moment ago, but something flat and exhausted and almost pleading. So you understand now why you will not touch me, and you will not rush me, and you will not raise the watch. If I fall, my fingers come apart. If you grab me, my fingers come apart. If the alarm sounds and the men below hear it, they tell me through this, a small motion of her head toward the camera at her breast, to let go, and I let go because they have my reasons in their hands the same as I have the wire in mine. Do you see? I am holding the door shut. I am the only one holding it shut. And I am so tired, Corwin. I am so tired of holding it shut. I did see. That was the worst of it. I saw all of it, the whole cruel architecture of the thing, laid out in a dark corridor by a woman who had helped to build it. A machine designed so that the last hand on the trigger belonged not to the men who wanted the deed, but to a person they had cornered into doing it, so that if it ever came apart, the hand they would find on the trigger would be hers, and not theirs. They had made her the lock and the scapegoat both. They had made the opening of that door her choice, so that it would never be traced to a choice of theirs. And they had given her, somewhere outside these walls, a reason. They have my reasons in their hands the same as I have the wire in mine. I did not know yet what her reasons were, but I knew the shape of them, because there is only ever one shape to a reason strong enough to make a person stand outside a sleeping child's door with a key in their hands and tears standing in their eyes. Someone she loved was held. Someone she loved would suffer if the door did not open. They had found a person with a soft place in them, and they had pressed on it until she agreed to do the unthinkable to spare the unbearable. This is the part where I must tell you the truth about myself, because the easy version of this story makes me a hero who saw clearly and acted boldly, and the easy version is a lie. The truth is that for several seconds, standing in that corridor, I did not know what to do. I had been trained for a threat. I had not been trained for a thread. Every protocol I owned told me to neutralize the intruder and secure the child, and every one of those protocols followed would have caused the exact disaster they were designed to prevent. Because to neutralize this intruder was to make her fingers come apart, and to secure the child by raising the watch was to bring the alarm the men below were waiting for. The machine had been built to defeat exactly the man I was, a good guard. A trained guard, a guard who would do the trained thing. So I would have to do something else. The first thing I did was nothing at all on the outside. Inside, I was moving faster than I have ever moved in my life, but a man with a camera trained on him through a stranger's chest cannot let his face move, and so I held the same flat, unhurried calm I would have held at the gates, and I made the man on the screen in the van see a guard who was thinking too slowly to be a danger. Let him believe that. Let him believe the guard was a problem the woman could manage. The longer he believed it, the longer he would wait before he gave her the order to let go. That was the thread I had to pull, not the wire in her hand, the patience of the man on the screen. Everything in this depended on that man not panicking, because the moment he decided the guard could not be managed, he would speak into her ear and she would let go, and it would be over. My whole task, I understood now, was to keep the situation looking to that distant watching man like a thing that was still under control, while I quietly took control of it myself. "What's your name?" I said quietly, as if we had time. She hesitated, then Ilse. It was probably not her name, it did not matter. "Ilse," I said, "listen to me. The man watching us, can he hear me, or only see?" "See," she said, "and he hears me if I speak up. There's a—" Her eyes flicked down the smallest motion toward the camera at her breast. "It only sends my voice if I want it to. I press the side of it. He can't hear us if I don't press it." That was the first gift the night gave me, and I took it without letting my face show that I had taken anything. The man could see, but not hear, unless she chose to let him. Which meant that the two of us, standing in plain sight of his screen, could speak, quietly, without moving our lips too much, the way men learn to speak on a parade ground when they must not be seen to speak, and he would see only a guard and a woman in a standoff, and would not know that the standoff had become a conspiracy. "Then we're going to talk," I murmured, barely moving, "and he's going to see two people at a stalemate, and that's all he's going to see. Keep your eyes on me. Keep the wire pinched. And tell me who they have." For a moment I thought she would not answer. The flat exhaustion came back into her face, and behind it something rower. Then she said in the same parade ground murmur, so low it barely crossed the 3 feet between us, "My son. He's 6. They took him on Tuesday, said he was on a school outing, sent me a note in his teacher's hand, and I believed it for a day and a half until the man came to my door. He had a photograph. Tomas in a room I didn't know, holding up that morning's paper so I'd know it was real, and it was now. And he told me what I had to do, and he told me what the camera would show him, and he told me that if the door opened tonight and the thing was done, Tomas would be left at a church 2 streets from my flat by morning, unhurt, and no one would ever know I'd had any part in it. And if it didn't—" She stopped. She did not finish. She did not have to. "I have stood guard, as I said, for 9 years. In that time I have learned to tell a true grief from a performed one, the way a man who has heard 1,000 bells can tell the cracked one. There is a particular thing that happens to a person's breathing when they speak a true and terrible thing aloud. A hitch and catch that cannot be faked because it is not in the voice but underneath it, in the body, in the place where the breath is made. Ilse's breathing did that thing. Whatever else she had lied about, the gray, the fright, the fire, she was not lying about the boy. And that changed everything, because it meant the machine was even crueler than I had understood. They had not merely cornered a person with a soft place. They had taken a mother's child to make her open the door to a child, so that the deed, if it came apart, would wear a mother's face and a mother's reasons, and the world would say, of course, a desperate woman, what wouldn't a mother do? They had built the perfect deed, one with a villain already supplied, a villain so sympathetic that no one would think to look behind her for the men who had aimed her like a weapon. Ilse, I said, look at me. Don't look at the door, don't look at the stair, look at me. I'm going to ask you a question and I need the true answer, fast and quiet. The note in the teacher's hand, the man at your door, the photograph. Did any of it, any single piece of it, name the people who actually want this done? Or did they keep themselves a mile back from you, the way they've kept themselves a mile back from the door? She frowned, not understanding why I asked. A mile back, she said. I never saw a face that mattered. The man at my door was hired, you could see it on him. He didn't care. He was a delivery. Good, I said. Then they made a mistake. It was the first time I had said anything that gave her hope, and I watched it land, a small flinch of the eyes, almost an injury, the look of a person who has set hope aside as a thing too dangerous to carry and has suddenly handed it back. What mistake? She breathed. The same mistake every careful man makes when he builds a machine to keep his hands clean, I said. He built it so that nothing leads back to him. No metal key to trace, no broken door, no record on the board, no face for you to name. He made the whole thing point at you. But a machine that points at you and not at him only works if it actually runs, if the door opens, and the deed is done, and you're left holding it. The instant it doesn't run, the instant the door stays shut and you're standing here alive with that case in your hand and that camera on your chest, every careful thing he did to point at you starts pointing the other way. The note in the teacher's hand, the man who came to your door, the photograph of your son, the van outside with a screen in it. He built a long, clean, careful trail, Ilse, and he built all of it on the belief that no one would ever follow it backward. We're going to follow it backward. But first we have to make the door stay shut, so tell me about the van. And that was the midpoint of the night, though of course I did not know it then, standing in the dark with the clock ticking, and a mother's whole world pinched between two of her own fingers. That was the moment the thing turned over a second time. I had walked in to stop an attacker. I had discovered a hostage. And now, in the space of a whispered minute, the hostage and I had become something neither of us expected to be. Not a guard and an intruder, but two people on the same side of a locked door, looking for the long way around a machine that had been built to be unbeatable, and finding, in the careful cleanness of it, the very seam where it could be torn apart. The van, she said, in the murmur we had both learned to use. I don't know where it is. Close, it has to be close for the camera. He said the camera reaches a few 100 yards, no more. The night I was given the case, they brought me to it blindfolded, but I counted the turns out of habit, and I smelled the river, and I heard a train twice. Close and low to the water and near a line. The river, the line. I knew the residential wing's outlook the way I knew my own hands, and I knew that the only stretch of riverbank within a few 100 yards of the east nursery corridor that also lay near a rail line was the old service road that ran behind the palace's eastern wall, where the delivery lorries waited at dawn, and where, by night, a parked van would draw no eye at all. They had not hidden the van far away and clever. They had hidden it in plain sight, in the one place where a parked vehicle was so ordinary that no one would think to ask whose it was. And that was a gift too, though a smaller one, because a thing in plain sight can be found by anyone who is told to look. But I could not tell anyone to look. That was the whole trap of it. The instant I broke the seal of this corridor, the instant I keyed my radio, or stepped to the wall panel, or so much as raised my voice toward the stair, the alarm I made would travel, and the men below would hear it, and the order would go up the wire to the man in the van and down again to the woman's two pinched fingers, and the door would open before any help I summoned could climb a single flight of stairs. I was alone with this. I had to stay alone with it for as long as it took to make it safe, and the only tools I had were the woman in front of me, the patience of the man I could not see, and whatever I could build out of the two. So I began to build. "Ilse," I said, "how does it end the way they planned it? Walk me through what's supposed to happen minute by minute if I'd never stepped out of that shadow." She told me. The case to the lock, the wire released, the door open in 3 seconds, she steps inside, and here her voice went very thin, because here was the thing she had been told to do, and I will not write it the way she said it, because the saying of it is not the part that matters, and the child is asleep and safe behind a door that never opened, and I will not put a shadow on her even in words. It is enough to say that the plan was quiet and quick and meant to look, when the household woke to find the worst, like an illness in the night, a tragedy without a culprit, a thing that simply happened to a sleeping child and broke a kingdom's heart and left no door forced and no record on the board and no face for anyone to blame. The cruelty of it was the cleanness of it. They did not want a villain. They wanted a grief. A grief moves a succession. A villain only moves a manhunt. And there it was, the thing I had been circling without seeing. A succession. You do not build a machine this careful, this expensive, this patient, to harm a child for the harm's own sake. Madmen harm for the harm's own sake, and madmen are loud and traceable and caught. This was not loud. This was a surgeon's machine, and a surgeon cuts for a reason, and the only reason precise enough to be worth this much careful cruelty was the oldest reason there is in a royal house. That a small girl asleep behind a white oak door stood, by the simple accident of her birth, between some patient and powerful person, and a thing they wanted very badly to inherit. I did not know then who that person was. I would not know for some hours yet, but I knew the shape of them, the way I had known the shape of the wrong and the geometry of the dark, and the shape was this: someone close, someone trusted, someone with the reach to learn the make of a new lock fitted in secret, the schedule of the night service, the name and the soft place of a woman with a 6-year-old son. Someone who could not be a stranger, because a stranger could not have known the things this machine knew. The machine had been built from the inside. That was the cold, clear thought I was holding when the false dawn came. The moment the whole night seemed, for 3 terrible breaths, to break the right way and then break the wrong way instead. It came as a sound, far off down the west stair at the very edge of hearing, a door. The soft, unmistakable sound of a door on the floor below opening and closing, and then a footstep, and then another climbing. Ilse's eyes went wide. "That's not the schedule," she breathed. "Nobody's supposed to come up." He said the floor was clear till morning, he said, and I saw the hope I had handed her curdle into something worse than fear. Because a person climbing the stair was a person who would see us, and a person who saw us was a person who would react, and any reaction at all, a shout, a gasp, a stumbled retreat, was the alarm, and the alarm was the order, and the order was the wire. For one bright, treacherous instant I thought, help. I thought, that is one of mine, a fellow of the watch making an unscheduled round, and in 3 more steps he will round the corner and there will be 2 of us, and 2 is so much more than 1. I felt the whole exhausted weight of the night lift at the thought of not being alone in it. And then I understood, the way you understand the wrong note in a song you know by heart, that it could not be one of mine. The watch does not make unscheduled rounds of the nursery floor. The watch holds its posts, precisely because a man wandering where he is not scheduled is exactly the thing the watch exists to catch. No guardsman would climb that stair tonight, which meant the footstep climbing toward us was not help at all. It was the other thing. It was the arm behind the hand, someone from the machine, come up to see why the door had not yet opened, come to lean on the woman in person, come to make her fingers come apart with their own eyes on her so that there could be no failure of nerve. The false dawn was this. For 3 breaths I believed help was coming. And then I knew that what was coming was the very last thing the night could afford, a second player, climbing into the one corridor where a single raised voice would kill the child, and that I had perhaps 20 seconds before they rounded the corner and saw a guard standing where no guard was supposed to be standing, beside a woman whose door had not opened, with everything written plainly on the both of us. 20 seconds. And the wire still pinched between 2 tired fingers, and the camera still drinking the dark on her breast, and the man in the van still watching, and the child still asleep, and the whole impossible machine still running. I had been still for 9 years so that I would know, when the moment came, exactly how to move. The moment had come. Here is what people misunderstand about restraint. They think it is the absence of action, a man holding himself back, doing nothing, swallowing the urge to move. It is the opposite. Restraint is action perfectly governed. It is the difference between a flood and a surgeon's hand. The flood does everything at once and ruins what it touches. The surgeon does one thing exactly at exactly the right moment and nothing else. For 9 years I had been learning to be the surgeon and not the flood. And everything I had learned came down now to the next 8 seconds, and the order in which I did 3 things that could not be done out of order. First, and this was the hardest, because every nerve screamed to deal with the climbing footstep, I did not turn toward the stair. I kept my body square to Ilse because the camera on her breast was watching, and the man in the van must not see the guard react to something off-screen. If he saw me turn toward the stair, he would know someone was coming, and he would not wait to learn whether it was friend or foe. He would give the order. So I held my face on Ilse and I said in the murmur, not moving my lips, "Someone is coming up. Don't look at the stair. Don't change your face. When I say the word, you are going to do exactly one thing, and your whole life and your son's life are going to live or die on whether you do it in the right half-second. Do you understand me?" She understood me. I will say this for Ilse to the end of my days. She was a frightened mother holding a key to a horror, and when the moment narrowed to a wire's width, she did not break. She held my eyes, and she gave me the smallest nod, no more than a fall of the lashes, and she did not look at the stair. "When I say now," I breathed, "you let me take the wire, not the case, the wire. You keep the case in your right hand exactly as it is. You don't move that hand at all, but when I say now you open your left fingers a half-inch and I take the wire from you and I keep it pinched, and the circuit never breaks because my fingers close before yours open. We're going to pass it like a baton, Ilse, like a thing that must never touch the ground. Have you ever passed a baton?" "No," she breathed. "Then we do it slow and we do it once," I said. "On now, not before, not after." The footstep reached the top of the stair. I heard the small change in the sound as a foot left the carpeted tread and met the bare boards of the corridor floor. 3 steps to the corner. 2. Now I did not say, because the timing was wrong, because if I took the wire this instant the new arrival would round the corner and see a guard reaching into a maid's hands and would shout, and the shout was the order. I needed the new arrival to round the corner first to see, to begin to understand, to take the one breath a person takes before they react. And in that one breath, while their attention was a fresh and unsteady thing, I needed to do everything. The footstep rounded the corner. I did not look. But I saw, in the edge of my vision and in the sudden change of the light as a body blocked the sconce, that it was a man tall, in a dark coat that was not a uniform, moving with the soft certainty of someone who believed he had every right to be there. He stopped. I felt him stop. I felt him take in the scene, the woman, the guard, the door still shut, the case still in her hand, and I felt the exact instant his understanding caught up with his eyes, the instant he opened his mouth to do the thing that would end it. "Now," I said. 3 things in the half-second, in their only possible order. I took the wire. My left hand, which had drifted by inches toward Ilse's all the while she talked, slow, unhurried. A thing the camera had grown used to seeing as part of the standoff, closed on the fine wire a hair above where her fingers pinched it, and pinched it itself, and held the circuit unbroken before her fingers opened. The baton passed. The door stayed shut. And in the same motion, flowing out of the same turn of my body, my right hand came up, not toward the man, not a blow, nothing the man could even see as aimed at him, and closed over the camera on Ilse's breast and the deadened lens that fed the van, and my palm covered it, and the man on the screen in the van went, in an instant, blind. That was the second thing, and it was the thing that mattered most, because the man in the van was the one who gave the orders, and a man who cannot see cannot know whether to give them. He would see, in the last frame before my palm fell, a guard lunging, and then nothing. Black. And a man watching a black screen does not shout "let go" into the dark, because he does not know what he would be saying it into. He does not know if the guard has the woman, or the woman has the guard, or the case is already safe in someone's hand. The blackness bought me the one thing I could not buy any other way: his hesitation, his half-second of not knowing what to do. The third thing was the man in the corridor, and the third thing was the only one that looked, to anyone watching, like force. And even it was not force the way the flood is force. He had come up the stair believing himself the master of the situation, the arm reaching in to lean on the frightened hand, and he had not, in his careful machine, planned for a guard who had already taken the wire and blinded the van before he finished his first breath. He reached for me, or for Ilse, or for the case, I will never be certain which, and I met the reach. I did not strike him. I will tell you plainly. In 9 years on the nursery floor I have never struck a man, and I did not strike one that night. I turned his reach past me the way the stillness turns a shove past the body, and I used the whole long weight of him, already moving, and I set him down, controlled, complete. His arm folded up behind him and my knee a settled weight across his shoulders, and his face turned gently to the cold boards, and I held him there, pinned and silent, in the space of time it takes to draw 2 breaths. And when it was done, I was kneeling on a stranger in a dark corridor with a wire pinched in my left hand, and my right palm sealed over a blinded camera, and a woman standing frozen above me with a key to a horror in her steady right hand. And the door was still shut, and behind it a child still breathed the slow, deep breaths of a sleep she would never know had been the most dangerous sleep of her life. We had perhaps a minute before the man in the van, blind and uncertain, decided that no news was bad news and did something rash. 1 minute to turn a held breath into a finished thing. "Ilse," I said, and my voice did not shake, because a guard's voice does not shake, but underneath it I was a man who had just run 9 years of stillness down into 8 seconds and had nothing left but the will to finish. "We're not done. We've stopped it. We haven't ended it. There's a wire in my hand that I can't ever let go of until someone who knows these things makes it safe. And there's a man under my knee who knows the names I need. And there's a van by the river with a frightened man in it who's about to do something stupid. I'm going to need you to be braver than you've been all night. Can you?" She looked down at me, the guard on the floor, the wire passed, the camera blind, the man pinned, the door shut, and something came into her face that I had not seen there before, all the long night. It was not hope exactly. It was steadier than hope. It was the look of a person who has been carrying a thing alone for so long that they have forgotten anyone could help carry it, discovering in the worst hour of their life that someone has put their shoulder under the other end. "Tell me what to do," she said. So I told her, fast and low, while the man under my knee breathed in shallow, furious silence, and the camera lay blind under my palm, and the seconds ran. The first problem was the wire, and the wire I could solve only by not solving it, by simply never letting go, by becoming myself, the held breath, the pinched circuit, the thing that kept the door shut. So be it. A guard's first duty is to stand, and I would stand here with a wire pinched in my fingers for as long as the night required, an hour, a year, until a person who understood such devices could come and make it harmless. That problem was not solved. It was held. There is a difference, and on the worst nights the difference is the whole of the job. The second problem was raising help without raising the alarm. And here was the seam I had been circling all night, the flaw in the careful machine, the thing the patient man behind it all had not planned for. The machine was built to defeat an alarm. A shout, a radio, the wall panel, the great bell, every loud thing was a trigger, because every loud thing would reach the van and bring the order down the wire. But the machine had no answer at all for a thing that made no sound. It had never imagined a guard who could summon the whole strength of the palace without a single noise, because it had been built by someone who thought of the watch as men who react, and reacting men make noise. I did not make noise. On the nursery floor, set into the wall a yard from my abandoned post, behind a small brass plate that the portraits hide and the tourists never see and even half the household has forgotten, there is a thing the quiet men installed the same winter they fitted the locks. It is not a bell. It is the opposite of a bell. It is a silent call, a single recess contact that pressed and held, wakes no siren and rings no alarm anywhere a child could hear it, but sends, soundless and instant, a signal to exactly 3 places: the watch room below, the captain's quarters, and the duty officer's board. It says, in its silent way, the one sentence the whole apparatus of the palace is built to answer. A guardsman on the nursery floor needs every man now and quietly. It is the call you make when noise itself is the enemy. In 6 years I had hoped never to use it. I had checked it, by feel, at the start of every single watch, the way you check a thing you pray you will never need. The brass plate, I told Ilse. By the head of the corridor where I stood, press it. Press it flat and hold it and count to 10 and don't let go. It won't make a sound. Go. She went. She set the case down. No. She did not. She could not. Her right hand still held it. And so she crossed the corridor with the key to a horror cradled in one hand and pressed the silent call with the other, and held it and counted, and the corridor stayed perfectly quiet, and somewhere below, in 3 rooms at once, men who had been dozing or pacing or filling out the long forms of the night came suddenly and silently awake to a single word on a board: nursery. And they came the way they had drilled to come, 100 times in the cold gray hours when drills feel like a waste of a man's life. They came without a sound. No boots hammering. No shouts up the stair. The first I knew of them was the captain's face at the corner of the corridor, and behind him the others, flowing up the stair and along the carpet runner with their weapons low and their mouths shut, fanning into the corridor in the soundless choreography of men who have rehearsed the one thing every guard on the nursery floor prays will never be real. The captain took in the scene in a single sweep, the guard kneeling on a stranger, the wire pinched in his fingers, the blinded camera under his palm, the woman frozen with a device in her hand and her finger on the silent call. And he did not say a word because he understood, the way I had understood, that this was a place where a single word could kill. And he made the small flat gesture that means hold, say nothing, await, and the whole corridor held. I have never in my life been so glad of other men. What followed took an hour and was done almost entirely in silence and in writing, on the small pads the watch carries, passed hand to hand, because we did not know, could not know, how much the device on Ilse's breast could still send, blind or not, and we would not gamble the boy on a guess. So the orders moved on paper. The men who knew devices came, gloved and careful, and one of them took the wire from my fingers the way you take an egg from a bird, his pinch closing above mine before mine opened, the baton passing a 3rd time, and only when he had it safe and had spoken 3 quiet words into a tool of his own, did he nod to me that I could open my hand. And I opened my left hand for the first time in what the clock said was 51 minutes, and could not, for a moment, make my fingers straighten. They had held so long and so hard. The van by the river was taken in the same silence, in the same hour, by men who went out the Eastern Service gate on foot and on paper, and surrounded a parked vehicle low to the water near a rail line, and opened its doors before the frightened man inside it, blind for an hour, watching a black screen, not daring to send the order he had been told to send, because he did not know what he would be sending it into. Could do the one rash thing we had all been racing. He had a screen and a tool that spoke up the wire, and a list of 3 names he should never have written down. He had written them down. The careful machine had one careless man in it, and the careless man kept a list. And the list was the thread that ran backward out of the corridor, down the stair, out the gate, across the river and up and up, toward a height none of us that night had yet let ourselves believe in. And somewhere in that same gray hour, 2 streets from a flat I had never seen, in a city waking to an ordinary morning that would never know how close it had come to grief, men of a different service moved very quietly to a room that a careless man's list had named, and they found a 6-year-old boy named Tomas asleep in a chair with his shoes still on, unhurt, guarded by a single hired man who gave up the moment a door he did not expect came open. And they wrapped the boy in a coat and they carried him out into the dawn, and the first thing he asked, they told me later, was whether his mother knew he had missed school. I was not there for that. I was on the nursery floor where my post was, where it had been for 9 years and where it would be again the next night and the night after. But I have held the picture of it in my mind so many times that it feels like a thing I saw, the boy in the chair, the shoes, the question. And I have decided that I am allowed to keep it. Because of all the things that happened that night, it is the only one that is pure, the one with no machine behind it and no cruelty in it. A small boy waking safe and worrying about his sums. Ilse did not see it either, not for some hours. They took her gently, the way you take a person who is both a perpetrator and a victim, and who has earned, in one impossible night, the right to be treated mostly as the second. She went without a word, and at the corner of the corridor, before they led her down the silent stair, she turned and found my eyes across the heads of the men between us, and she did not say thank you, because thank you was too small and we both knew it. She only looked at me, the look that is steadier than hope, and then she was gone down into the waking palace and the long machinery of questions, and I was left standing my post in a corridor that had nearly become the worst place in the kingdom and had, instead, held. Behind the white oak door, 15 feet from where I stood, an 8-year-old girl slept on and woke in time to an ordinary morning and asked for her breakfast and never knew. That was the point of all of it. That was the whole of the duty. She was never meant to know. She is not meant to know now. But the Queen was meant to know. And that in the end was the hardest part of the night, not the wire, not the man under my knee, not the blinded van by the river. But the moment, some hours past dawn, when I stood in a quiet room and told the mother of the kingdom what had stood outside her daughter's door in the dark, and watched a woman who had ruled with composure through every storm of her reign go entirely, utterly still. They brought me to her in the small morning room she favored, the one with the eastern windows, where the early light came in thin and gold across a floor that had seen 100 years of quiet decisions. Queen Maelin of the royal house of Harrowgate stood by those windows when I came in, already dressed, already composed, already. I could see it in the set of her shoulders, bracing for whatever it was that had made her captain wake her before the household stirred, and ask her to receive a guardsman of the nursery watch. She had been told only the bones of it. She had been told her daughter was safe. She had not yet been told the rest, because the rest was mine to tell. And the captain, in a kindness I have never forgotten, had judged that it should come from the man who was there. The prince consort Aldrich stood a little behind her, near the cold hearth, his face the gray of a man who has been awake with bad news. He said nothing the whole time. It was the Queen's room and the Queen's daughter, and the Queen's to hear. "Tell me," she said, "just that, a Queen's economy." So I told her. I told it the way I have told it here, in order, leaving nothing out and adding nothing, the wrongness in the geometry of the dark, the woman in stolen gray, the hidden hands, the case and the wire, the camera and the van, the boy named Tomas, the silent call, the man under my knee, the list a careless man had kept. I did not soften it and I did not sharpen it. A queen does not need it softened and cannot afford it sharpened. I gave her the truth at its true weight, and I watched it land on her one piece at a time. She took it well at first. She was Maelin. She had taken hard things well her whole life. It was half of what the kingdom loved her for. When I told her of the case and the wire, she drew a slow breath and her hand found the back of a chair, but she stood. When I told her of the boy, something moved across her face that was almost worse than grief. The particular horror of a good person learning that a child had been taken to harm a child, but she stood. When I told her how near it had come, the 3 seconds, the half-inch of a tired woman's fingers, she closed her eyes for the length of one breath and opened them and stood. It was the last thing that took her down. Because she asked, of course. At the end, when the telling was done, she asked the question every person asks, the question that is really the only question, the one underneath all the others. Who? Who would do this? Who could possibly want this? Who in all the world would build so patient and so cruel a machine to reach a sleeping 8-year-old child who had never in her short life done a single soul any harm? And I had to tell her that the list the careless man kept had 3 names on it, and that 2 of them were hirelings, men of no consequence who would be found and held and forgotten. But the 3rd name, the name at the top, the name that the other 2 led up to, the name that the men of the other service had carried to her captain in the gray hour, and that her captain had carried to me to carry to her, because someone who had been in the corridor should be the one to say it aloud. The 3rd name was not a stranger's at all. I will not write it here. It is enough, and it is the whole of the thing, to say that it was a name the queen knew, a name she had trusted, a name that had sat at her own table, and held her children on its knee when they were small, and stood near the front of every portrait of the family for 15 years. A name with a place in the line that the small girl asleep behind the white oak door had, by the accident of her birth and her brother's, quietly and permanently displaced, and that had decided, with the patience of 15 years and the coldness of a surgeon, to remove the obstacle and inherit the place, and to do it so cleanly that the world would only ever see a grief and never a crime. The machine had been built from the inside. I had known it in the corridor. I had not let myself know how far inside until I stood in that gold morning light and said the name aloud and watched it reach the queen. She did not cry out. I want to set that down plainly, because the easy version of this story would have her cry out, and she did not. Queen Maelin of Eldermore heard the name of the person who had tried to take her daughter from her, the person she had trusted with the whole of her family for 15 years, and she made no sound at all. She simply stopped. I have stood guard for 9 years, and I have seen every kind of human stillness there is. I have seen the stillness of discipline, which is my own. I have seen the stillness of fear, and the stillness of sleep, and the stillness of the dead at a state funeral. I had never, until that morning, seen the stillness that took the queen, the stillness of a person whose whole understanding of their own life has, in a single word, come apart in their hands, and who has not yet found the new world they must now live in, and so stands frozen for a long moment between the world that was and the world that is, unable to speak, because there are no words yet made for the place where she suddenly stood. The light moved on the floor. The prince consort took 1 step toward her and then stopped, because there are moments a person must cross alone, and the queen looked at me, at the guardsman who had brought her this, the worst and most necessary thing anyone had ever brought her, and she opened her mouth to speak, and nothing came. Twice. She, who had answered a kingdom's questions for 20 years without ever once being lost for a word, stood in the gold morning light and could not find a single one. It lasted, I think, no more than half a minute. It is the longest half-minute I have ever stood inside, and I did the only thing a guardsman can do in the presence of a grief he has himself delivered. I stood, and I let her have her silence, and I did not look away, because to look away would have been to leave her alone in it, and she had been alone in enough already without knowing it. When she found her voice at last, it was not the thing I expected. It was not rage, though the rage would come and would be terrible and would be just. It was not a command, though commands would come too, and the patient machine would be taken apart name by name in the days that followed, and every soul who had built it would answer for it. It was none of the great things a queen might say. What she said, in a voice gone rough and small and stripped of all its long composure, looking not at the window or the prince consort or the morning but at me, was this. She left her nightlight burning, the queen said. Maelin, she still leaves it burning, because she says the dark watches you back. And her face, which had held through everything, broke at last not into weeping, not yet, but into the terrible openness of a mother who has just learned how right her child had been. It was watching, she whispered, all this time. It was right there in the dark, and it was watching her, and I sent the locks. I sent the quiet men with the locks. I thought I had made her safe. And there was nothing I could say to that, because she had not made her safe. The locks had been the very door the machine walked through, and yet she had made her safe in the end, because she had also done the thing that mattered more than any lock, which was to put men on that floor whom she could trust to stand in the dark and feel the wrongness in the geometry of it and not look away. She had made her safe by making the watch. She simply did not know it yet, so I told her. The locks didn't keep her safe, Your Majesty, I said. That's true. They were the way in. I have never spoken so plainly to a queen before or since, but a person who has stood inside another person's worst half-minute has earned a kind of leave to speak. But you didn't only send the locks. You put men on that floor and you told them to trust what they felt in the dark more than what they were told in the daylight. You made it so that the wrongest thing in the kingdom could stand outside that door, and a man would feel it and step out of his shadow and not look away. That kept her safe, not the lock, the watch, and the watch held. The queen looked at me for a long moment. Then she did a thing that no protocol in 9 years had prepared me for, and that I will carry to the end of my life. She crossed the gold morning room and she took my right hand, the hand that had pinched the wire for 51 minutes, the hand that still, even then, would not quite straighten, and she held it in both of hers, and she bowed her head over it. A queen to a guardsman. It lasted only a moment. The prince consort turned his face to the cold hearth to give us the privacy of it. And when she lifted her head, her composure had come back. Not the old composure, but a new one, harder and quieter. The composure of a woman who knows now exactly how thin the floor is and intends never to forget it. Tell me his name, she said. The guardsman who stood in the dark. I want to know the name. Corwin Vance, Your Majesty, I said. Corwin Vance, she repeated, the way a person repeats a thing they mean to keep. You will not be on the nursery floor much longer, Corwin Vance. Not because you failed there, because you are too good to leave there. But tonight you will stand where you stood because she is asleep, and she must wake to an ordinary morning, and the most ordinary thing in her world is the man at the head of her corridor. Go and be ordinary for her. That is an order, and it is the only thank you I have that is large enough. So I went and I stood, and Princess Maelin woke to an ordinary morning and asked for her breakfast and never knew. She is older now. She no longer leaves the nightlight burning. She told her mother last winter that she had decided the dark did not watch her after all, that she had only imagined it. The queen told me this with a small private smile, the smile of a woman who keeps a secret for love, and neither of us corrected the child. Let her think the dark is empty. We will keep the watch in it for her. That is what the watch is for. The machine came apart in the weeks that followed, name by name, exactly as I had told Ilse it would in the corridor. Because a thing built so that nothing leads back to the builder works only as long as it runs, and the instant it stops, every careful clean thread that was meant to point away begins, relentlessly, to point home. The careless man and his list led to the hirelings, and the hirelings led to the third name, and the third name, the one I will not write, the one that had held the children on its knee, led, when the quiet men came at last, to a fine house on a fine square, to a person who had been so certain of the cleanness of the machine that no plan at all had been made for the day it failed, because failure had not been imagined. They are answering for it now, in the slow and total way that the law of Eldermore answers such things, and they will answer for it for the rest of a life that will be spent entirely in the answering. There was no grief in the end. There was a crime, and a culprit, and a reckoning, the three things the machine had been built, above all, to prevent. And Ilse. People always ask about Ilse when I tell this, and I am glad they do, because she is the part of the story I am proudest to have write. She had carried a key to a horror to the door of a sleeping child, and the law of Eldermore does not pretend that such a thing is nothing. But the law of a good kingdom under a good queen also does not pretend that a mother with a 6-year-old held hostage and a gun to her child's name is the same as the men who put the gun there. She told everything she knew, and what she knew tore the machine wide open, and the queen, who had every reason in the world to hate the hand that nearly opened her daughter's door, asked herself that the woman's terror be weighed against the woman's deed. It was. She did not go free. She did not ask to. But she went in time home, to a flat I have never seen, and a small boy named Tomas, who missed a week of school and worried about his sums, and who is, the last I heard, top of his class in them now and does not remember any of it, and never will if his mother and I have anything to say about it. Some things the dark should keep. I am back at my post tonight as it happens. They moved me up, as the Queen said they would. I stand now where more is asked and more is trusted, but tonight a younger man is sick, and the captain asked if I would take the old corridor for one watch for old times, and I said yes before he finished asking. So here I am. The portraits watch the dark with their painted eyes. The great clock ticks on the landing. 15 feet away, behind a white oak door with a small brass handle worn bright by small hands, a girl who is not so small anymore sleeps the deep, slow sleep of the safe, and does not know, and is not meant to know, that a man stands in the dark at the head of her corridor and feels, in the geometry of it, every shape that does and does not belong. The dark watches you back. She was right about that, the little princess, more right than she ever knew. But she had the half of it that frightened her and not the half that should have comforted her, and so I will set it down here, the whole of it. The thing I learned the night the woman stood outside her door with a key in her hands, and the Queen had no words. The dark watches you back, but so do we. And we do not blink, and we do not look away, and we do not move, until the moment comes when moving is the only honest thing a man can do. Then we move once exactly, and we set it right, and we go back to standing. That is the whole of the duty. That is the whole of the honor. The stillness is only the half of it the world can see. The other half is what we are still for. And the watch holds. Tonight and every night the watch holds.